Hey everyone. Sorry to interrupt you. I'm excited by your conversations. One of the things I'd love to do is to let the whole room benefit from some of the conversations that you're having at your table. I'm guessing that your table probably talked about one or two of these things in particular, and that there was some perspective shared, challenges, successes, questions. So I would love to get some feedback from each of the tables. I really believe that a great deal of the learning that can happen in this room is from the people sitting around your table and sitting with you. So I want to create some space for that. We've got a microphone over here that Andrew has. We've got Dwayne with a microphone over there. And I would I'll ask for volunteers first. How's that? And if there's no volunteers forthcoming, then I can ask a table in particular and make it more like that. But would anyone share with the room some of the thinking, discussion, questions, argument, objection, concern that this conversation had for you?
Hi.
Hi.
Stephen Dilla. So we talked a little bit around the idea, like a lot of these are conceptual and they're great. One of the ones that seems to be in conversation a lot right now, I'd like to get your thoughts on, are the two shifts that are happening with the family. One of which being the question of whether is it a societal erosion that caused family erosion, which now new thinking is saying, hey, it's actually family erosion that caused societal. The second one, everything that's being written on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, lower foundations were essentially what marriage was about for the history of society. Now the lower foundational points are met. Marriage is much more difficult because now it's about the top piece of the triangle. Then the question comes, is marriage even a sustainable model in modern society? So I don't know like all that that's shifting from and to, but I think it has probably massive ministry implications as we think through these.
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to take that as a comment as opposed to a question because otherwise we'd run out of time. But
I'd like to hear your thoughts. I mean, more on that, but anything, if you feel like are the concepts that you gave us, is that fueling that? Or is this something else that needs to be kind of another spoke in the wheel?
yeah, I tell you, I don't know. I just got back from China a few weeks ago, and in China, 60 million kids haven't seen one or both parents in the last 90 days. You have somewhere between 250 and 300 million immigrant families. If you bring your child with you to the city to get a job, then you have to pull them out of public education. And if you pull them out of public education, then you pull them out of availability for the public higher education. They can't go to college, which means you have to have enough money to send them to a private college or to an international college, which is really expensive, as you can imagine. So the divorce rate is escalating so fast in China that they're trying to figure out how to pass appropriate laws because the parents on each side are giving the couples money because the property values in China are so high in the cities that the couple can't afford a property. But then the couple gets divorced. And so the parents are going, we put all of our money, all of our savings into your marriage, and now you're getting divorced, we want it back. So Beijing is actually trying to pass laws to restore the capital spent on real estate in a newlywed couple to go back to the investing parents at the dissolution of that marriage. I say that by way of illustration to say it's not only the US that's wrestling with family, but I think that we've got a range of sources that are putting it under pressure. So maybe we could think of it as like the challenges of families in an abundant society and challenges of families in a society with a lack of abundance or that are rising societies. Certainly governments think that having intact families and healthy families is essential to the well-being of their country, and they're right. The social science would indicate that the anticipated life outcomes of a child raised in an intact family are quantitatively and statistically far superior with regard to substance abuse, with regard to high-risk behavior, with regard to academic outcomes, with regard to anticipated marital and vocational outcomes. There's a great study on this. It's a lit review called, I think it's called Why Family Matters. It was reviewed and assembled by everybody from Dartmouth to Princeton, Yale, Harvard, incredible list. I can get you the book title later if you remind me. But essentially it went through a review of the extant literature on why this really does matter. But in terms of what's fueling its challenge, which I think is at the heart of your question, that's a really good question. Yeah. We didn't put it as part of our global shifts because it is, most of the shifts that we tried to look at were sort of had a unique space within the ecclesiastical world, sort of the church and ministry world. And as church and ministry leaders, we want to say, hey, this is some of the stuff we're seeing. Maybe you're seeing it too. What do we do about it? Certainly there are other shifts that are going on beyond those, having to do with globalization, with the rise of technology, the speed of an information society, the changing. So maybe you read Don Clifton's The Coming Jobs War, and it's like, hey, there's going to be 4 billion people who want a good job and 2 billion people and 2 billion good jobs. What does 20 years from now look like? Or maybe you read Tyler Cohen, The Age of Average is Over, and he talks about the hollowing out of the middle class that's coming in North America in the next 20 years. He's an economist. There's all kinds of other seismic shifts that we didn't cover here. The ones that we try to focus on are sort of unique to the church world and unique to the ministry world. What's changing in our world uniquely that we need to figure out how to respond to, but certainly there are other shifts that sort of exceed the scope of this time together, but that are of utterly critical importance. So if you figure out what it is, Stephen, you need to share it with us. What is it?
I'll tweet it.
Thank you. That would be fantastic. Anytime that you find yourself in a conversation discussing Maslow, it's been a good day. So, other responses. What were your tables talking about? I think you all, can I have that mic? I would love for you to share what we were talking about.
No way.
Yes, please. It was great. Annette had some really interesting insights I want you all to hear.
I don't remember anything that I said around the table. I'm kidding. I was just hoping that sometime today and tomorrow you would help us to be able to focus or refocus on taking the time away and doing the long-term look at ministry or whatever we're doing in life, as opposed to only fighting the fires. And I was thinking that it would be helpful to the people in this room also if we could figure out how we don't just count numbers. Numbers are so important to us for fundraising reasons, for impact reason. If there is another way that we can measure, you talked about it, outcomes versus output. If you could help us figure that out and telling our stories throughout our organizations, I think that'll be helpful to us in the room.
Excellent. Thank you, Annette. You got Andrew? Andrew's got it. Others? Good, please.
Hi, Cedric Johnson. I see your comments, I would characterize it as a spoke in this larger wheel. I'm a student of globalization, and I don't think globalization needs to just be framed in economic terms, but when you think about globalization, political, cultural, so forth and so
Ecclesial,
on.
yeah.
Ecclesial, right? And I see in our discussion today, you've kind of teased out some of the dynamics that particularly impinge upon what we do as ministers of the gospel. But as you alluded to, I really see all of these structures, systems, flows, dynamics as being interrelated, interdependent, and impinging upon and impacting one another, right? But globalization has kind of been the lens through which I've been trying to kind of get at some of these things, and I found the way you've outlined it today to be very helpful. As it relates to kind of what happened at our table, I think one of the themes that happened was, on the one hand, at least for me anyway, an awareness of these forces and these trends, right? And seeking to, but this tension, right? The difficulty of living into these values,
Yeah.
even as we're in this kind of this liminal
Yeah.
tension between these two spaces, right? Recognizing the reality that we're facing in ministry today, but yet this pull of these old frameworks, right? There's still, if you're not conscious and intentional, you look up,
Yeah.
right? and you still see them impinging upon your work, and you're kind of, so that the living into this new moment and the tensions that pull upon us, right, that hinder us from living fully into this new moment was one of the themes that I saw kind of come through some of the conversation we had at our table today. Did you want anything?
Yeah, you know, it's one thing to recognize the changes. It's another thing to reinvent what you're doing and who you are in light of those changes, and to actually stick with that. It's a lot harder. It's a lot harder. It's kind of off topic, but one of the interesting things, I was reading a book about the introduction of new firearms, and when a new firearm came that allowed for much more rapid loading and much more accurate fire, the original generals that commissioned armies to use it still lined them up in the same way that they lined up the armies when your bullets were flying all over the place. That was why they put that big line in, because like I'm aiming like this and I'm going to hit that guy. And so it took them decades to go, okay, wait a minute. I can actually now hit, because we rifled the bullet, I can hit the target I'm aiming for, and I can load fast, and I can be on the ground and do it. Why am I standing up all of my soldiers, 40 yards away from the other people who are all standing in line and we're killing each other? Like, maybe we should rethink this. And I'm not, please forgive me if, I'm not trying to be violent or anything. But it was just interesting to me to go, this has always been a problem. New technologies come, they disrupt our existing paradigm, and new technologies, by the way, are social technologies as well. There's some of these social movements. They disrupt our current paradigm, and we can't just expect that we instantly know how to deal with that, or that we try and deal with it correct the first time. We've been trying to wrestle with some of this stuff as a ministry for like 7 years now. We're better. I can see progress, but we haven't arrived. And it's 7 years. 7 years we've been working at this, and I'm like, man, this is hard. Because you've got hundreds of years of cultural and institutional inertia behind you, and it just ain't easy to turn that boat. You see the iceberg and you go, somebody ought to turn this ship. Somebody. And then you look in the mirror like, oh, I'm one of those somebodies. Okay, good luck with me. I think that's a great comment. Others? How about from this table back there? Andrew. They are filled with words to say.
Wow. So I work for a nonprofit, so I've been kind of riding that saddle of output to outcome for a long time. So it's obviously, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's the way it's got to be. But then it gets deeper when you look at it from a spiritual side,
Yeah.
And that's where some of the deeper questions go. We're kind of unpacking that a little bit. And I personally propose that it needs to be done. Not so much saying that I don't believe in the Holy Spirit anymore and far as taking care of that, but it's incumbent upon us for excellence. And people don't like self-evaluation. I know I don't like, but when you hold the mirror up, we need to get better at that. I personally think, and that's where the outcome stuff is important. Metrics on people, our ministries, the challenges, like the old typical. I travel quite a bit in the work I do, and I watch us very often with the old model of missionaries. Let's spend $100,000 to train somebody, to learn the language, get fully enculturated. No judgment on anybody here, because there's places where that works and it's great and it's a rich history of that working. Or do we take that same money and dump it someplace and build a school and help facilitate that, where we train 300 local pastors who knows what's going on in the field, that can be 1,000 times more effective. They've been raised in that culture. And I've been in the middle of that journey for a while. But, we need to take a look at that hard.
Yeah.
Because the Western Christianity, to me, is scaring, very scary.
Yeah.
Again, when you look at what's going on in Africa, Southeast Asia, Central America, so.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I hope, by the way, I know we're talking difficult things, and almost certainly we're going to offend each other at some point. My hope is that we just give grace and recognize we're all on a journey together, and just assume the best, at least, of intentions, even if we misspeak. The one who doesn't offend in word is perfect in deed. So thank you for honest sharing, because I'm seeing it too. Yeah, no, I see it. Yeah, I'm seeing it. Thank you for that.
Chad, can I
yes.
just ask, Joshua made a good point about faithfulness, what you talk
Yeah.
about faithfulness and that tension between fruitfulness, which I think we can parallel to this conversation of
Yeah.
outcomes. And I think you said it in your presentation, at least you've said it before with our team, that there's no outcomes without outputs. So the conversation of outputs isn't versus, but are our outputs pointing to our outcomes? And
Yeah.
so you talk a lot about faithfulness and that tension. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so at some point in the time that is now past, outputs, the effort, the sweat, the diligence, the fact that we worked really hard and didn't get paid much, and that we were in early and out late was sufficient. It's still necessary. It's just not sufficient anymore. So you're right, there are no outcomes without outputs. You actually have to get out there and work really hard to do anything, to change things. And the best example that we have of that is Christ. Works pretty hard. You'll notice if you study the life of Christ that generally the disciples finish their workday sooner than he does his. So I'm not suggesting that that suddenly our work and the intensity with which we do it and the fidelity with which we measure our efforts is irrelevant. It's not. It's profoundly relevant. But what I'm suggesting is that we need to go even beyond that and to say, okay, absolutely, praise God for this. Now, and it's a great segue actually into the next conversation that we're going to be having. So if I can just say stay tuned for coming attractions, and I would love for us to really dig into that more than I'm prepared to at this point with just a brief comment before we go on break. Other tables. Outstanding, yes.
Hey, Chad. My name's Ken. I'm from the Poconos.
Hi there.
And I've actually partnered up with my pastor. My previous life was I was a sales guy for Mars, sold a lot of chocolate. And now, you know, I've been involved with a lot of different organizations in the Poconos, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Children and Youth. And I think what our pastor sees is sort of this need to, you know, look at our community and look at all the people there and say, how do we better serve them?
Yeah.
You know, what are the kinds of things we can do? And we were talking about collaboration and cooperation, and you know, there's a lot of resources, you know, a lot of churches in the Poconos. Some of them are going down in attendance.
Yeah.
And, you know, as we start to work on these initiatives and we do our needs assessment and we figure out how to put this plan together with all your guys' help, you know, you figure you have an army of people out there that you would like to engage. And, you know, you want to build this spirit of cooperation and not like you're in a competitive environment where, you know, you're not looking to displace another or have somebody join your church, but rather, you know, if the needs to find more mentors, if the needs to find more foster care families, or if the needs to help, we have a, you know, big drug problem that's getting bigger, you know, to create awareness with the parents on how they can interact and watch for that. You know, how do you build this sort of spirit of cooperation so that, you know, it's not just a church, it's all the churches, it's all the believers that are kind of coming forward to say, you know, we've got to address what's going on in our community and how do we make it better.
Yeah.
And I think what, you know, as we went through and talked about this, I mean, this is a great framework for thinking about how the world's going. And, you know, now the question is how do we like formulate our plans and how do we, you know, go from output based, like, oh, we have 50 Big Brothers and Big Sisters matches, so what? You know, how do we make that better? And how do we get more people to say, yeah, I want to be part of that?
Yeah.
You know, kind of create this movement. So I guess for me, a lot of rambling, but that's kind of what I'm looking to get out of this is, you know, we get this framework, we have a way to go forward, and, you know, with all of us here, like, how do we, you know, get the insights to do that, and how do we, you know, make that step, you know,
Excellent.
and how do we enlist the rest of the people to come with us?
I think between the rest of today and tomorrow, we will give you a significant contribution to operationalizing that question.
Awesome.
I don't think we won't, it's a day. I mean, there's only so much we can do with a day. But I think we can make a serious dent in that question. So I'm excited for that. This table, we've got some tables that have not said anything. Andrew, come on. Roland, would you share? Yeah. All right. Roland will share with us.
Didn't know I was going to get a mic. One of my concerns, and it's not just myself speaking, but since I'm the only one here, I'll be the only one speaking. You know, I was sharing with the table how in the past, when I was in the working environment, you know, I was in a position where you were affecting change. You were looking to make things better, and if it didn't make it better, at least it made it different. And all of a sudden, you find yourself retired, you know, senior citizen, quote unquote, and you basically find that you're in a position now to either accept or not accept the changes that are going around you. And when you mentioned work on traditions of the past, you know, versus creating the futures of tomorrow, my concern, especially when I look around the world today, is do we have to sacrifice every single tradition
No.
in order to embrace the futures of tomorrow? I think one of the biggest problems, don't forget, in the church world, speaking in the church world, you know, where we have all this new technology and the energy of the next generation and all that, there's still a generation out there, believe it or not, who comes to me every Sunday morning and, you know, can't we sing one of the old songs? I'm sure some of you must have heard that. And I see the country, you know, I see family traditions going out by the wayside. I see the world's traditions of our country going out by the wayside. And I wonder, is there room for a partnership or a merging of some of these traditions with some of these future creations?
You know, it's funny that you say that because I was having a conversation with one of our leaders the other day, and he talked about how do we reimagine the catechism. Talk about blending the tradition with the future. In a pluralistic society where it's harder and harder to have sort of firm anchor points, how do we help, and we were thinking about particularly with the next generation, how do we help them get some anchor points? And these are just certainties. These are certainties. They're not opinions. You know, my friend said, you know, this is my perspective, but how do we give them things that aren't perspectives, that aren't opinions, that are fixed? And I agree with you that we need to not make trying to deal with the reality that is emerging, declaring war on the history that we've lived. But instead, you know, the nature of the gospel is reconciliation. So I 100% agree with you. I 100% agree with you. I think my biggest question, concern with regard to that is, are we doing things on purpose? Like, did we stop and decide to do the kind of blended service we're doing with the incorporation of the hymns that we chose because of reasons that were thoughtful? You know, what I think we need to challenge ourselves on is when we get to the point of pace that we aren't able to step back and to be thoughtful about our work. That's not to suggest that the future is good and the past is bad, far from it. It's to say, how do we marry a rich tradition and a rich heritage with a rapidly changing and emerging world, and how do we do it on purpose? To the glory of God, prayerfully, in a way that's led by the Spirit. But honestly, if we're just going to be honest for a sec, most of the time, if you ask someone if they've got space to sit for a few days or a week and really consider that, come on, good luck. Like, that's a hard thing to get. I mean, when we talked about a meeting like this, we're like, do we do 2 days or just one? Y'all, come on. I mean, let's be real. Like, really 2 days? You might be killing yourself. And you're like, well, you got to give people a little time to just process what we're talking about. Yeah, 2 days is a long time. And it is in our world. So how do we find the space to have that kind of meaningful reflection and to communicate it among our constituency so that we're not shepherds leaving behind a flock and they're like, where are you going? But we're actually bringing them with us. It takes time, and time is the scarcest commodity of our world today. It is more scarce than oil. It is more scarce than cash. It is scarce. And it's not just scarce here. I'll tell you, around the world, time is increasingly scarce. A function of globalization and urbanization and a whole host of other things, but it is scarce. So I'm with you. I just want to do it well. I want to do it on purpose. Thank you. From this table. Have we heard from this table yet? I don't think so. Hi there, my name is Chad. It's nice to meet you. We'd love to hear from you.
Hi, Chad.
Hi.
I'm Susan. First of all, our table, Sandy has shared, and we all agree that this was just what you shared is so excellent, a succinct summary of really the concerns that we all have in each of our ministries. And I think it's going to be really powerful to just bring this back to each of our ministries and share this. I think we are all aware of this, but to just kind of put it together like this, I think it's going to be so effective. So thank you for that. Some of the things that we talked about were, again, about the outcome base and also realizing, thinking about what Annette shared, that the outputs are important. They lead to the outcome. But more and more in this day and age, it's really about the stories. And even with my own ministry, what we're actually trying to do is capture the stories of our past, what was the legacy in terms of the past, to be able to know how to create the stories of the future, taking our strengths and then letting go of the weaknesses. But also, I think, just lost my train of thought. Yeah, I think what we realized, also what Ashley was sharing with her in the church, it's about inviting people that the church normally doesn't want or doesn't feel comfortable with. And so I think a lot of what you're sharing with us is about us willing to get all messy and to have an agileness to understand that we have to change things and to shift. And some of that actually means going back and really understanding what the early church did and practicing that now, really living that out. And I think it first starts, for me on a personal level, it comes from my own life. How do I do everything holistically where God is in the center of all of it? And, I'm particularly in the wellness community, and a lot of them love the universe. And a lot of the church is very uncomfortable with people like that. But I actually am very comfortable with them. And so my challenge now is how do I enter into that, but really help them to see how Jesus is the greatest healer of all, and to be drawn to that. So we have to be willing to shift our thinking and to get uncomfortable and to, get messy with all of this, because it's not going to be clean cut.
Yeah, well said. Sir.
As a preacher, I'm kind of concerned if our congregation were to look at my preaching with outcome-based kind of attitude. Coming back from a counseling background, dealing with managed care and whatnot, you have to have achievable goals, and then the show, what has been done and what's achieved, and then to extend sessions, you have to, justify it or what have you. But in terms of ministry, I see the need. I see the need of doing the outcome-based ministry, because our church, we put a lot of resource into church education. And I've been there for 7 years, and we rarely do any evaluations of our curriculums. We think of what we think will be good, we do it. Whether it's teacher or student dynamic, the ratio, what have you. But never really do any like exit interviews or what have you to see, or send reports to the parents, how your child has changed from here to there at the end of the year, or what have you. But I guess let me just ask one question: is what are the perhaps misuse or dangers of outcome-based ministry? I mean, are there some?
I'll tell you the biggest one we've seen in our own work is a moralistic reductionism. So in our work, we start with the premise that what you care about, you measure. And what you measure is what you care about. But some of the things that are the easiest to measure are not things that we ultimately care about, but they're easy to measure. And so there is a seduction there that you've got to be really careful about getting into outcome-based ministry, that you go, how do we not reduce the mystery and transcendence of a heart slowly being awakened over a lifetime to the gospel and seeing it play out slowly, incrementally, fleetingly, falteringly, but still there, real, substantive. How do you not replace that with, we're going to measure the number of students who attend class. We're going to measure the number of students who smoke or don't smoke. We're going to measure the number of, it's good, not smoking is good. It's good. It's just not enough. And so one of the dialogues we've had to have in our own missional community around the world is, yes, we are moving towards trying to be thoughtful about evaluation. And some of the things that are most important to us are very hard to evaluate. Better to have an imperfect evaluation of the right thing than a perfect evaluation of the wrong thing. And how do we focus on that? And it's okay that it's not perfect, as long as we're working at it. And all of this, by the way, I'm really thankful for some of this feedback, because I think we're going to talk about it in this. What does it mean to do good ministry? And that's a journey that we've been on now for a number of years, wrestling with theologically, philosophically, organizationally, missionally. What does it mean to do good ministry? And basically in the next session, I'm just going to try and share some of the things that we're learning. And it's imperfect, but what a great question. Thank you. Any of it? It's last call. You're dying. You want to say something. I see it. I see it. No. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Over here. Dwayne?
Yes.
Over at our table, we started off with a conversation of limited to holistic with one particular food-based ministry that was saying the holistic needs were so outweighing kind of their specialty. We do food. And so that led us to a conversation of moving from a list, this incredible list, to more of almost a network map picture of these things, so that, as we talked limited to holistic, we realized that ties directly to the idea of closed denominational moving to open kingdom.
And unilateral to cooperative.
Yeah, because you don't have the resources to do
That's
that.
right.
So the sort of feet on the ground cooperation, if you take one piece without the other, it doesn't work. And so you see this web start to emerge of these things working together. You have the north to south going to the all to all. That's creating a huge pool of specialists that we didn't have before. So that goes to more of our cooperative
Absolutely.
resources. And then we sort of morphed into this discussion, though, of how, while it's great to look at these cultural trends and changes, in some ways the concern was if we don't overlay the values, the certain non-negotiable values, especially in the church setting, is that, at the center, for example, is a cross and a lordship of Jesus. That's one of our church values. We talk about the lordship of Christ. Well, when you come unilateral to cooperative, sometimes you can find, culture is saying, well, we don't want any unilateral anymore. What we want to see is all you churches get it together, decide on one amalgamated theology that works for everyone, and bring that back to us, and that's when you'll be culturally relevant. And that is a bit of a danger for churches, because there are certain non-negotiable values that if you don't lay over this, you'll chase culture instead of shaping culture, as Christ and the apostles. So
Absolutely.
Some of the stuff we talked about.
Absolutely. It's a great point. I think our purpose in this first conversation is to say, here are some of the things that are changing independently of us, but we have to decide to the glory of God how we respond. We decide what to do about it. So none of this dictates anything to us, but none of this is, neither though is any of this under our control. These changes are taking place. And the question is, what does a faithful response to them look like? And that's something that each of you are going to have to think about. And it's particularly why we designed tomorrow to be individualistic, fundamentally individualistic. It's not all of us talking about the same conversations at the same time. It's giving you tools and help to process some of what we're going to talk about. What does this mean for me? And here's a process to work through to give you space to consider. Annette and I were talking about how amazing it was in the Old Testament that the Lord gave these festal weeks for Israel to leave their land, leave their property. I'll watch it. I'll make sure you don't get invaded. I'll take care of your crops. I'll keep an eye on the homestead. You go and remember your first love. You go and reconnect with me. You go and remember ultimate. When do we get to do that anymore? Christmas? In church? You got to be joking me. Well, we have Easter. Come on, yeah. So it's like, and so in some little micro way, because if I offered you a week, you would never take me up on it, I'm offering you like a composite of like 8 hours. Here's 8 hours. This is like our Feast of Tabernacles. We'll put up tents, you know what I'm saying? Like, but it's just a chance to pull back a little bit and be like, all right, Lord, the world is changing. What do you require of me? What do you invite me into? What is the open space that you're inviting me into look like? It's the whole purpose of this day and a half. So you're on break. I'll see you in 15 or 20 minutes. And we're just going to start, so if you miss it, then you miss it. So we ain't chasing you down. We love you, but we're all grown up, so.